this session. So after we finish, I will try to upload this in Blackboard, so you will have access to it. And I'm gonna send a message so people will know that the lecture is gonna be there. So I will be happy to do the lecture if at least there is 1 or 2 people so they can ask questions. But I know that everybody's busy. I will be traveling during these days. So the reason I did this today is because tomorrow I'm going to San Diego for 3-4 days, then come back and then go to Colombia for almost 15 days. So I'm gonna be away, but it doesn't mean that we cannot communicate. That's the beauty of this program. So let me get started with this. So chapter number 1, if you already took macroeconomics, you have an idea how markets work. So in this case, we are gonna start basically from the idea of the market. So a market is a place where buyers and sellers get together. So the buyers are gonna be the consumers and they are gonna be the demanders in the economy. On the other hand, the sellers are gonna be the business firms, those who are producing goods and services, and they are gonna be the suppliers for this economy. So at the end, we are gonna have demanders and suppliers interacting, and when suppliers and demanders are happy because they met their quantity expectations and the prices, so the market is said to be in equilibrium, okay? So that's very good because we can talk about markets and anything has a market response. Like for example, I always tell students, do you think that education is a market? And of course it's a market. So there are suppliers of education, which are the schools, and you guys are the demanders of education. So at some point, what explains that Colombia is more expensive than, I don't know, probably FIT? Well, because Colombia has more demand, so more people want to be there, so they are willing to pay a higher price. So everything has a market response, believe it or not. And once you understand the idea of supply and demand, you can very comfortably talk about economics. So this is a very important issue. So this is the outline for today. So we have demand, supply, and what is called market equilibrium. So these demand and supply are gonna be expressed through some lines or curves. So, and we are gonna be changes along the curve, and also some factors that are gonna shift the entire demand and the entire supply. So, and we have a little explanation how it happens. We also are going to include some thoughts about price ceilings and price floors. So we are assuming that the economy here is going to work perfectly fine. The demand and supply, suppliers are happy, demanders are happy, so the equilibrium happens. But suddenly the government intervenes and they set either price ceilings or price floors. So what happens when that happens? A market that is good, like just for example, the price of an Apple computer. So producers, the Apple guys produce the computer that is sold in $2,000. Consumers like me, like you say, well, that's a fair price, I can pay for that. So what happens when this market that is working efficiently is intervened by the government? So governments might say, oh, no, this is too expensive, let's set the price lower. So that creates a problem in the economy. So that's the idea of price ceilings and price floors. And then the last chapter has to do with the consumer and the producer surplus and the concept of efficiency. So some of these ideas, why things cost more than others, well, it has to do with availability. So for example, probably computers are more accessible than avocados. Why? Well, because probably computers are built in America or some places where we can get it for a cheaper price. Avocados, they come from other countries and is sometimes more difficult to get them. So this example is really good. So why organic vegetables and fruits are more expensive than the regular ones? Well, of course, the idea of eating organic, so it raises the demand for the product. So because it's more people have the taste for this kind of goods, so the price is going to be higher. So there are many reasons explaining supply and demand. So we are going to start by defining what is demand. So demand is the amount of goods or services that consumers are willing and able to purchase at each price. The idea for this demand and these two concepts are very important. The willingness and ability to buy, that's what defines the demand. For example, I might be willing to buy a BMW, but I am unable because I might not have enough money. I probably have the money to buy, I am able to buy a BMW, but probably I don't like it. So my willingness to buy is going to be zero. Probably I prefer some other type of cars. So in order to be the demand, this amount of goods have to be, the consumer needs to have the willingness and the ability to purchase it at a different price. So that means that, for example, if I like pizza and the pizza is cheap, probably I will buy many slices of pizza. But if the pizza is more expensive, I will buy less. So these purchases are a function of the price. Every time the price goes up and down, I am making choices on how many goods I'm gonna buy of them, right? Pizza is very expensive. I probably will have one slice of pizza a day because I can afford it. But then pizzas are becoming more expensive. Probably I will buy it once a week. So these prices are what buyers, well, the definition of prices in this context is what a buyer pays for a unit of a specific good or service. So as we can see very clearly, the demand is a combination between prices and quantities. So every time the price changes, I define the quantity of goods I want to buy. So we can define this quantity demanded as the total number of units of goods or services that consumers are willing to purchase at any given price. So once again, pizzas are inexpensive, I will buy more. Pizzas are more expensive, I will buy less. So the quantity demanded is gonna be defined by the different prices, right? So all we know, this is part of our common sense. I know that if the good is expensive, I will buy less. If the good is inexpensive, I will buy more. Well, basically, we are putting names to something that we already know. So our common sense tells me that if I go to the supermarket and I buy tomatoes inexpensively, I will buy more. So that basically is called the law of demand. So the law of demand is this relationship that says the following. If the price goes up, then the quantity demanded goes down. So be very careful in this case, because I am saying that the price goes up, the demand doesn't go down. What goes down is the quantity demanded. So basically what I want to say that this quantity demanded is a function of the price. So that basically means that when the price changes, we are going to be moving along the demand curve. I'm going to make this more clear, but just keep in mind that every time the price changes, the quantity demanded of the good is going to change, okay? So, and on the other hand, when the price goes down, so the quantity demanded goes up. So we have a very clear relationship between quantities and prices. So, and as you can see, well, we departed from our common sense. Now we are putting names. This is the law of demand. Now we are dealing with a relationship. We have two different variables. One goes up, the other one goes down. So basically, if we have to draw a line in a space, so basically the slope is going to be downwards, right? So that's how we portray these kind of things. So when the price goes up, the quantity goes down. So we have an inverse relationship between quantities and prices. So that basically means that every time the price goes up, the quantity demanded goes down. So the two variables, prices and quantities, are moving in opposite directions. So if we have this graph, so basically even I don't know this, I know that the mathematical principle tells me when two variables are moving in the opposite direction, the slope is going to be negatively related, okay? So that is something that you probably will be able to know because you have already taken classes of economics. So we're putting together things like price, quantities. Now we call law of demand. Now, based on this law of demand, I can portray, I can depict, even in my mind, how the law of demand is going to look like. Okay. So, so with this information, if we have a set of prices and we can determine how much we can buy for this, so we can do the demand schedule. So the demand schedule is a table that shows range of prices and how many of them we are going to buy given the prices. So, and based on this demand schedule, we are going to put these dots together, and we are going to build the demand curve. Okay, so the demand curve is a graphic representation of the inverse relationship between prices and quantities. So for convenience, we're going to put the quantity in the horizontal axis. So in the horizontal axis, we're going to put the quantity, and in the vertical axis, we are going to put the price. So that's how we are going to represent this in our graph. So we have here a couple of information. So for example, if the price is 220, this is the demand for gasoline. If the price is 220, we are gonna demand 420. So if the price goes down, of course, I will be happy to buy to buy gasoline more often because I can afford it. So if the price is $2, I will be able to buy more, like from 420 to 460. So once again, as the price goes down, the quantity of gasoline increases. So if I put all these dots together, I can see that the demand curve is going to be downsloping. So that means that as the price goes down, the quantity goes up. Okay. So the points of a demand schedule are graphed here, and the line connecting them is called the demand curve. So keep in mind, every time the price changes, the quantity is going to change. So we are going to be moving along the demand curve. So if the price goes from $2 to 180, we are going from 460 to 500 million gallons, right? So we are moving along the demand curve. So that tells me something very important. When the price changes, we move along the demand curve, right? When something different than the price, because there are some other determinants of demand, like for example, the amount of income I have. If I am unemployed, probably I will be able to afford something like this. But if I have a good job, probably I will be able to consume more because I have more money. So in this case, any change in the price is gonna lead to changes in the quantity demanded. So we are gonna be moving along the demand curve. If something different than prices changes, this entire curve is gonna shift to the right or to the left. Okay, keep that thought in mind because that is very important. So the downward slope of the demand curve illustrates the law of demand. So this is the inverse relationship of prices and quantity demand. So we started from common sense, we gave the name of law of demand, we portrayed in our mind how the demand curve is gonna look like, we gathered some data, and then we were able to draw the demand curve. So we can see that our guess was true. So we have this inverse relationship that is portrayed by the downslope, the slope that is going down for this this graph. Once again, price decline, quantities increases, and vice versa. So for supply, it's exactly the same, but we have to kind of wear the shoes of the supplier. For example, if I am a consumer, I really like low prices. Why? Because if I have limited money and the price is low, I will be able to buy more. What happens with the suppliers? Well, just imagine that you are producing coffee, like you are the owner of a Starbucks coffee place, right? So when people pays you $2 for a cup of coffee, you will be happy probably because you can pay your employees, you can pay the electricity, you can pay the inputs, and then you get some money like a profit. But if somebody pays you $2.50 rather than $2, you're gonna be happier because you are making more money. So that tells me that when the price increases, suppliers or producers are gonna be more happy or happier because they will increase their profits. So when they are increasing their profits, they are gonna be willing to produce more. On the other hand, the opposite, when the price goes down, so from $2 to $1.50, probably you cannot pay your employees and you cannot pay some of your expenses. So you start producing less until the point that probably you are gonna close down your place. So that tells me that when the price is high, producers are willing and able to produce more. And when the price is low, so they are discouraged to produce more. So we have this idea, which is a mirror image of the demand. So supply is the amount of goods or services a producer is willing to supply at each price. How many of them are they gonna supply? Well, it depends on the price. Of course, if people are willing to pay for an Apple computer $3,000, well, of course, the producer is gonna be very happy. So in this case, the higher the price, the more willingness of the producer to produce more. So we have the quantity supplied. This is the total number of units of a good or services that are willing to provide at a given price. And as we said before, that has also importance. This is the so-called law of supply. So if the price goes up, the quantity supplied goes up. So that means when the price is higher, producers are willing to produce more. When the price goes down, then the quantity supplied or produced is gonna be lower, okay? So we know, we now know that is also the same idea. We have a supply schedule and a supply curve. So the supply schedule is a table that shows potential quantities supplied at different prices. For example, if you are you are selling hot dogs on the street and the price increases, of course, you want to produce more, right? So with this information, we are gonna be able to create the graph that shows this relationship between prices and quantity supplied. And once again, because I know that when price increases, the quantity increases, so I'm gonna guess that the slope is gonna be up. So we have a curve. The supply curve is gonna be up sloping. So, so we have this idea. So this is the idea that we were looking at. When the gasoline is $1, probably producers of gasoline there and say, well, that's too cheap. I cannot produce at that price. But as the price starts increasing, producers have more incentives to produce more. So when the price is $2.20, very likely producers are gonna produce a lot. When the price is too low, they are gonna be willing to produce very little. So that basically this upward slope gives you the idea that we have a low supply that says that higher prices leads to higher quantity supply and vice versa. So so we have the supply on one side, we have the demand on the other side. When the demand curve and the supply curve intersect, we can say that this is the equilibrium point. So equilibrium is gonna be defined by two different things. One, when the quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied. Very careful, you never say demand equals supply. You say that the quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied. That's when the market is at equilibrium. So there are no surpluses, neither surpluses nor shortages that could happen in this case. So we are at equilibrium first when the quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied, and when there is only one price that clears the market. For example, when quantity supplied demanded equals quantity supplied, there is only one equilibrium price. So this is the price where quantity demanded is equal to quantity supplied. So in some cases, so in this case, we have the equilibrium price and we have the equilibrium quantity. This is gonna be the equilibrium quantity and there is gonna be only one equilibrium price. But there are some cases where we have that the price for some reason is higher than the equilibrium or is lower than the equilibrium. When the price is, so when the market price is higher than the equilibrium price, we are going to have a surplus, or it's also called excess supply. So the price, a price higher than the equilibrium, so that sends the message to producers that consumers are willing to pay more for that product. So they start building more of the products that they are producing. So at some point, producers are producing too much. Consumers, because the price is higher, they are consuming less. So there is an excess supply. So at some point, and happens very often, for example, car makers, they project the demand in 2 million cars, they only sell 1,800,000. So what they are going to do with the 200 that are left? Well, they have to lower the price. So that lowering the price makes more people to buy those cars. So at some point, when the market price is higher than the equilibrium price, we have surpluses or excess supply. But also when we have when the price is below the equilibrium price, we have shortages or excess demand. The price is too low. People want to buy the product no matter what. But because the price is low, producers don't have the incentives to produce them. So there is an excess demand or there is a shortage of products. So at some point, if there is a shortage, and I really want the good, I'm willing to pay more. So because I'm willing to pay more, producers are willing to produce more. So that's how the equilibrium is going to be restored. Okay. Is there any questions so far?
No, not yet.
Okay, so I'm going to try to go faster because I mean I'm sure that you already have seen those concepts. So this is the idea: the price is higher than the equilibrium. This is the equilibrium. This is the price. For some reasons, producers believe that the price should be higher, so they produce more. So consumers, this is the demand curve. They are consuming less, and this is what what producers are producing. So in order to restore the equilibrium, producers have to lower the price. So at this point, consumers are gonna try to buy more. The opposite happens when the price is lower. So we have a shortage. The price is too low. Consumers want to buy a lot. Producers don't want to produce that many. So in order to restore the equilibrium, consumers are willing to pay more. So we are moving along this curve, and producers then are willing to produce more. So we have this price above the equilibrium, we have the excess supply, we have the price below the equilibrium, we have an excess demand. So, and this is very important because every time we are assuming these changes are happening, we are always assuming what is called ceteris paribus. So that means that one thing is changing, other things remain the same. So other things are gonna be equal. So if I assume that the price of one good increases, so I'm gonna assume that all other things are gonna remain the same. So that's how we operate here in this part of demand and supply, because we cannot capture all these changes at once. So we have to assume one, keep everything fixed, then we go to the second change, the other things become fixed. So we are gonna have a better idea in a few more minutes, but just keep in mind that we are allowed to change only one thing at a time. So this is the demand curve. So as you can see, we have a match of prices and quantities. If the price increases, basically we are gonna be moving along the demand curve. So if the price decreasing, we are gonna be moving along the demand curve. Once again, prices are causing changes in along the demand curve. So in this case, this is different because there are outside factors that are shifting the demand to another place. For example, in this case, I might assume that this is the demand for a person with low income. That can be the demand for a person with a higher income. So they, regardless of the prices, they are gonna consume more. So probably what happens is, if we are talking about society, this change in demand is due probably to an increase in population. So population might have increased, so the demand of everything is going to increase. So there are many factors that can shift the demand to the right or to the left. So, and those are non-price determinants. Every time the price of the product under consideration changes, once again, we move along the demand curve. When any other factor that is not price related, so they are causing shifts of the demand to the right. If the demand declines, so the demand is moving to the left, okay? So in this case, we are assuming that there is an increase in income. So increased demand means that at a given price, the quantity demanded is higher. So the demand curve shifts to the right from D0 to D1. So that means that some factors are shifting the demand curve to the right. In this case, might be due to the increase of incomes. So probably the person got a better job, got a raise, hit the lotto, whatever happened. So that is explaining why this person or this group are buying this amount regardless of the prices. So on the other hand, when the demand shifts to the left, so that means that there is a decrease in demand. Probably the person lost the job, population is shrinking. I don't know, many factors can explain a decrease in demand. So once again, to the right is an increase in demand. To the left and down is a decrease in demand, okay? So, so what are the factors that cause this shift in demand? Well, we have many things. I mentioned before income. So income is very important. You have more money, you buy more of the goods that you want. You have less money, you buy less of the goods that you want. So more money shifts your demand to the right, less money shifts your demand to the left. So at some point, tastes might change or preferences. Like for example, I like pizzas. So probably people like pizzas, right? So suddenly somebody invents something better than pizzas. So because there is a change of tastes, the demand for pizzas is gonna be low, right? So that means that, for example, if there is a good that is better than pizzas, so the demand for pizzas is going to shift to the left, because now less people like pizzas than before. So that happens with many products. For example, the demand for iPhones probably is going to decline if the availability of other smartphones like I don't know, some other brand names become more popular. So the demand for iPhones is gonna shift to the left if that happens. So also we might face changes in demand when there are changes in the composition of the population. The composition and the size, a growing population increases the demand for goods and services. A decrease in population, sometimes countries go through wars, so that means that the demand for goods and services is going to be less. But also, not only the size, but also the composition. We know that, for example, now population is aging, so the increase in the number of older people is going to increase the demand for more, let's say, health services, housing services, nursing services. So probably that's gonna change the nature of demand. So how population is composed. Also, we have two different types. So what happens when a good is a substitute? For example, what happens with the demand for beef when the price of chicken is cheaper? So for example, if beef is cheaper, so the price of beef declines, so the quantity of chicken is going to increase, right? Why? Because, sorry, so if the price of beef increases, So we have substitutes. The price of beef is cheaper, yeah. So what happens with the demand for chicken? So because chicken is now more expensive relative to beef, so the demand for chicken is gonna decline. So that happens when the two goods are substitutes. So the price of beef becomes cheaper, so the demand for chicken is gonna be less. So because people are gonna prefer more beef because it's relatively more inexpensive than chicken. So we have these two different goods. As you can see, this is the price of a substitute good. It's not the price of the good under consideration. So that's the reason this factor is gonna shift the demand. For example, we also have complements. What happens when, if I like to drink tea with milk? So the price of milk declines. So of course I will have more money to buy more tea. So because I like to drink tea with milk, so when the price of milk declines, the demand for tea increases. So we have these two goods that are either substitutes or complements. They affect the demand for certain products. But also, very important, is expectations. So when expectations are positive, people tend to buy more. When expectations are negative, people try to save more money and spend less. So for example, if we know that the economy is doing fine, yeah, probably I will spend, I will buy a house, I will buy a car, probably I will spend money in more clothes. But if I know that the economy is not very good, probably I will be fired. So that expectation is affecting negatively my level of consumption. So the demand is affected, once again, by income, by changes in tastes or preferences, by changes in the composition and size of the population, by the presence of substitutes or complements in the economy, and by changes in the expectations. Also, we have, well, this is what happened. This is an increase in demand. So either any of these factors happened, so the demand is going to shift to the right. As you can see, it doesn't have to do anything with the price of the good under consideration. It has to do with outside factors that are promoting this shift of demand to the right. So these factors are changing the demand to the left. So the demand is shifting because population are likely to buy drops, income drops, the price of substitute falls, or the price of a complement rises. So that has an impact in the demand of the good under consideration. So this is also very important because in many cases we're assuming that when income is higher, I will buy more of the goods and services that I like, right? That is very common. So when income increases, people tend to buy more of the goods. But most of the goods then are going to be considered normal goods. So when income increases, I try to buy more of the goods that I like. But some goods happen to be inferior goods. When my income increases, I tend to buy less of them. So this basically happens because this good is inferior. Let me give you an example. When families are poor, they tend to buy more potatoes in order to feed the family. They buy a little bit more potatoes. But when people get more money, potatoes are less in the stew than meat. So because people have more income, they are getting rid of the potatoes. So that happens also, for example, when you are traveling, if you are a student and you live, I don't know, let's say in Cleveland, and you have to travel, if you don't have money, you use the bus. But if you are working, probably you will be able to afford a plane ticket. So bus rides are considered inferior goods, and probably plane tickets nowadays are considered normal goods. your income increases, you try to buy more of them. We mentioned the substitutes and the complements. So those are very important. A substitute, a good or service that we can use in place of another goods or services, like the case of chicken and beef. I can substitute one for the other. And complements is when they come together. So for the supply is very similar. We have this supply curve. So if the supply, if the price increases, we're gonna move along the supply curve. But if there are outside factors, the supply curve is gonna shift. So in this case, so a shift to the left and upwards, that means a decrease in supply. A shift to the right and downwards is an increase in supply. So every time supply shifts to the left, so we have a decrease in supply. Once, if the supply shifts to the right, the supply increases, right? So there are some factors. So this is the example. This is an increase in supply. This is a decrease in supply. So this is the original supply. So what are these factors? Well, there are many factors explaining why the supply curve shifts. Once again, has nothing to do with the price of the good under consideration. So basically, many of the shifts are due to changes in the inputs or the factors of production. For example, when labor is more expensive, production becomes more expensive. So that means that when labor increases, when wages are going up, so very likely producers are gonna produce less. When the price of the materials are going up, also is less affordable, so they can buy less machines, they are gonna produce less. So, or any of the inputs, for example, electricity, oil, or if you are in the fashion industry, buying clothes, buying things, so it's gonna be more expensive. So if any of these factors of production increases in price, your ability to produce is gonna decline, so your supply curve is gonna shift to the left. But for example, if there are some of the prices are now less expensive, machinery is less expensive, labor might be less expensive, so very likely the supply curve is gonna shift to the right. So some other factors that affect supply, natural conditions, when we have good weather, we produce more. When we have bad weather, we produce less. We mentioned the input prices, labor, machines and materials. So if, they are determining whether the supply shifts to the right or to the left. Also, what is important, technological change. Any improvement in technology is gonna shift the supply curve to the right. And government policies, sometimes they are good. If the policies are good and promote businesses, supply is gonna shift to the left, to the right, sorry. If the government is restrictive and puts so many restrictions and laws, and so very likely the supply curve is gonna shift to the left. So we have these cases, an increase in supply, and this is a decrease in supply, right? So either higher taxes, more regulation, poor natural conditions, they are gonna shift the supply to the left, and the opposite is gonna shift the supply to the right. So, so in order to do this, that's when I was saying the ceteris paribus, we have to follow these 4 steps. For example, we are gonna start by drawing the supply and demand curve, right? So once we do the demand and supply, we are gonna look at the change that is gonna happen. And we have to decide whether this economic change affects the demand of the supply. For example, if I have a supply and demand graph with the equilibrium, so, and I say that population increases, well, very likely the demand is gonna shift to the right. So I know that population growth has to do with demand. If I say change in technology, well, that is gonna affect the supply. If you remember the factors affecting the supply and factors affecting the demand. So, so we have these well-defined factors. I need to know whether they are affecting the demand or the supply in order to make the right, identify the curve that is going to shift. So then decide whether it causes a shift to the right or to the left. For example, if I say technology improves, well, very likely the supply is going to shift to the right. If I say increase in population, the demand is going to increase to the right as well. So one thing happens, so we decide whether or not affects demand, and then whether it's to the right or to the left. And once we have look at these changes, we identify the new equilibrium. So we have here one, this is the original demand, this is the original supply. Very likely in this graph, technology improved. So for that reason, the supply curve shifted to the right, and so shifted to the right. What happened is this is the original equilibrium. Now we are changing to the new equilibrium. So as we can see, only one thing changed, which is the supply, but the demand remained exactly the same. So at this point, the shift of supply to the right is having the following effect. So prices are going to be lower, but also quantities are going to be higher. So that is good when supply shifts to the right, because prices are coming down and quantities are increasing. So this is good. So in this case, we identify this change, right? So probably it's technology improved, shifted the supply to the right. So now firms are able to produce more and prices are going to be lower. Remember, technology, what makes is helps you to produce more, probably using the same resources. So that's going to be a good thing for the economy. So here we have a shift to the left of the demand. Very likely there is a recession. People are losing their jobs. So incomes are declining. So it's very common that during recessions, the demand curve shifts to the left. So in this case, the case is the following. When the demand curve shifts to the left, so we have less production and prices tend to be lower. Opposite, if the demand goes to the right, so prices are going to be higher and production is going to be higher as well. So, so in this case, this is very important to identify the direction of the change and identify the two different equilibrium points. So in this case, we have less prices and lower quantities. In this case, this is a good change because we have more quantities, but lower prices, okay? So, and we're getting close to the end. So this is an example. This is a decrease in supply. This is a decrease in demand. So as we can see, the original point here is at E0. So when we have a quantity and a price, so then the supply shifted to the left. Probably there was a, like for example, when in 2010, I guess, or 6, I don't remember, a big storm affected most of the oil facilities in the Gulf of Mexico. So the price of oil was very high. So because there is less oil produced, so because of a catastrophe, a natural disaster, so prices of oil were higher, but also this high price was explained because of the less production. So in this case, the shift of supply to the left is causing lower quantities and higher prices. So in this case, we have, like in the previous case, the demand shifted to the left. So we have less quantities and lower prices. So, and once again, we are gonna look at what happened here. For example, in this case, in this particular example, higher labor compensations are explaining why the supply is less. Because, well, probably workers were unionized, they are asking for more money. So the cost of production for these companies is gonna be higher. So it makes sense that the supply is gonna be lower. So in this second case, the change of demand to the left is explained by a change of tastes away from postal services and probably in favor of something else. So people don't like the postal service, they probably will find UPS or some other things more efficient. So because people prefer other goods than this is a substitute, so then the demand for services in UPS, the USPS, the United States Postal Service. So that is the explanation that the demand curve shifted to the left. So that is less demand, here is less supply, okay? So almost at the end, we have this case, we have a shift in demand and then a shift in supply. So what the ceteris paribus tells me is that I'm gonna do first the demand that changes from, well, not, sorry, in this case is we are here when this is the original supply, this is the original demand. So the first step is that the supply is gonna shift to the left. So we are gonna do the shift of supply first, and then we are gonna do the shift in demand second. So at the end, we are moving from E0 to E1, which is the increase in supply. Then we are moving from E1 to E3, which is the shift in demand. So at the end, the overall effect is going to be given by E3, right? So that means that the first case is that we are moving from this supply to this supply along the demand curve. And then once we reach this equilibrium, something else happens. Probably in this case, the price of labor is higher, but also the demand for the product, the preferences are changing, so the demand is shifting to the left. So we have the overall effect. In this case, the overall effect is that we are producing way less, and probably the prices, which were higher because of the decrease in supply, they are compensated by, at some point, the decrease in demand. So at the end, the overall effect in prices is not that significant. So, so we have to look at cases one by one. First of all, identify one change, then identify the second change. That's what we did here. So once again, this gets very complicated. All I can say here that movements are different from shifts, and that's something that I mentioned before. There are many questions in the quizzes that has this idea, the change in so we are moving along the demand curve when the prices changes. We are shifting the demand or the supply when something different than prices changes. So for example, moving from E2 to this, from this equilibrium to this point, so we are moving along the supply curve, right? So when we are moving from this point from S0 to S2, so this supply is shifting. So it is different than moving along, than shifting the curves. So you're gonna find many questions in your quizzes that are related to that. Anything that changes the price of the product under consideration means that we are moving along the demand or the supply curve. Any other change is shifting the demand or the supply, okay? So keep that in mind because it's very important. So the last topic I want to briefly talk about, which I guess is the last topic. No, this is not the last topic, but this is very important. We have the so-called price ceilings and price floors. So once the equilibrium is reached, there is no incentive for anybody to move. For example, if I am happy buying an Apple computer in 2000, and Apple is happy to sell me that computer because they make profit, they pay all the expenses, so we are happy. in some cases, governments have the power to intervene in markets. So in this case, they can implement what is called a price ceiling. So that is the price that is below the equilibrium price. So for example, so one example of these are rent controls. For instance, if you want to find an apartment in Manhattan, very likely it's going to be very expensive. But at some point, government said that is unfair because we want everybody to have a good life. So the government implements a price that is below the equilibrium price. On the other hand, we have the opposite. So at some point, prices can be higher than the equilibrium. For example, farmers are producing corn, but you can buy corn from Mexico, which is way inexpensive. So farmers in America cannot compete with farmers in Mexico. So that's the reason governments implement a high price to protect this domestic market. So price ceiling, the price below the equilibrium, price floor, the price above the equilibrium. So so at some point that's not good because, for example, just imagine that the price of an apartment, let's say $600, but the government says no, has to be 500. So basically, the market is affected because a shortage is going to be implemented. At some point, the amount of people who want to rent an apartment at 500 is going to be very high compared to the people who want to rent, to landlords who are willing to offer apartments at that point. So in this case, less landlords are gonna offer apartments, more tenants are gonna demand apartments. So at some point, there is gonna be a shortage. So when price ceilings are present in markets, they produce shortages or an excess demand. So on the other hand, when we have a price floor, they produce a surplus. So what happens is the price is higher than the equilibrium price. So producers have the incentive to produce more of that product. So demanders are going to buy less. So in this case, there is an excess supply or a surplus. So that is not good because at this point, either consumers have to pay higher prices to get the goods that they want, and also, it's not either, it's also to offer these higher prices, so governments have to subsidize producers. So they use taxpayers' money to give money to these people to produce more, which is unfair. So that is a misallocation of resources. So the market will be better off if the price, the equilibrium price, would be prevalent. So, but that's the case. So in many cases, markets that are working fine, they are affected by government decisions. Finally, for today, we have these very important concepts. So in order to study supply and demand, we have to understand these terms. So the first one is called the consumer surplus. For example, I have been talking for almost 1 hour and 15 minutes. I am extremely thirsty. I can offer a person $10, $20 for a Coke because I'm very thirsty. But if I go to the supermarket or if I go to the machine next to my door, I can buy a Coke for $2. So the difference between my willingness to pay and the market price is what makes the consumer surplus. So when my willingness to pay is very high, but the market price is very low, so I will be happy. So lower prices make consumers happy. On the other hand, we have producer surplus. So in this case, the producer surplus is the opposite. So so when for example, if I sell something that is like it cost me $1, and the cost of production, remember, includes labor, includes materials, includes machines, and a little profit that I can make. That's the minimum profit I can make. For example, I produce one item in $1 and I sell it in $1. So I'm gonna be happy. But if I can sell the good in $1.10, $1.20, I'm gonna be more happy. So as prices increase, the producer surplus increases. So that is kind of like the eternal fight between consumers and producers. Consumers want lower prices, producers want higher prices. So at some point, if we add the consumer surplus plus the producer surplus, we are going to be able to compute what is called the social surplus or the economic surplus, or also called the total surplus. So we have consumer and producer surplus. That's what happens. But the problem is, this is when the market functions well. What happens when the government intervenes? Well, there is a loss in some of the producer surplus, some of the consumer surplus. So when that happens, when the government implements price ceilings or price floors, we have what is called the deadweight loss. So that is the loss in social surplus that occurs when markets produces, or when the market produces an inefficient quantity. So we have this case. This is the perfect case. So we have, for example, the demand and the supply, they intersect. So producers are happy at this point, consumers are happy at this point. So the surplus is evenly divided between consumers and producers. So, but what happens when the government intervenes in the market? Well, that's not good. I am so much against market government intervention because, for example, in this case, so this is the price, the price at the equilibrium, but suddenly the government implements a price ceiling. So they implement the price below the market price. So at this point, just to make, so in the previous case, you can see that consumers and producers are evenly, the surpluses are evenly divided. So in this case, we are going to see that this is the whole consumers, so the whole consumer surplus above the 600, and below all this is the producer surplus. When the price falls, so consumers are expanding their surpluses, but they are losing this part. For some reason, the government appropriates this part, and the producer only is getting this part. So that is unfair because those resources that are lost because of the government price ceiling, so they are going to be lost, and they are going to be well, just lost. So at some point, consumers are winning some of the producer surplus, and the producer is going to be worse off because they will have less incentives to produce. So price ceilings are penalizing producers because it's still part of the producer surplus that is stole or gained by the consumer, but also there is some losses. So U and W are going to represent the losses. In this case, T and V are going to be part of the consumer surplus, and only X is going to be part of the producer surplus. Once again, U and W are going to be lost. What happens in the opposite case? Well, that is worse because at this point, consumers are losing part of their surplus. So when the price is above the equilibrium price and we have a price floor, so the producer makes expands his or her surplus, but also they lose this part. So consumers are only getting the G, they lost H and J. So in this case, the producer are getting I and H, but both producers and consumers are losing J and K. So that is not good because in many cases when policymakers make the wrong call, or they intervene in markets that are functioning well, so some of the surplus, some of the benefits of the market are going to be lost because of government intervention. So is there any question? I try to be fast, and I don't know if this is helpful for everybody. I hope this is, because many of the questions that you're going to see in chapter 1, in chapter 3, are very close to this. So do you have any questions?
Nope.
No.
No?
Don't.
Nope.
Okay. So I'm gonna send an email to everybody, inviting them to attend the next meeting. If at least a couple of students reply with a yes, I will do the class. Otherwise, if nobody replies, I will not do the class. So, so I hope somebody replies. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm gonna upload this presentation in Blackboard. I hope I can do it. So so I think that's it for today. If there is no questions. Okay.
All right.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. I please try to reply my email. Okay.
Okay.
Whether with
All right.
okay. Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.